Arog kayo. Marhay na hapon, Bicolandia, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Ateneo ICTC YouTube channel. I'm Iris, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we start, please don't forget to click the subscribe button below and hit that notification bell for webinar updates. And with that, allow me to ask you a small favor to comment down your location from where you are watching right now. So we would know if from what province are you from. So comment po kayo kung taga-san po kayo and kung anong school. So, yan. Also, we have viewers from Campo Camarines Sur. Hello, Maria Jessica Valle. Mga taga-san pa po yung mga viewers natin? So we have from Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Pasig. So we have viewers from Metro Manila. Hello, Ms. Rowena Rios. Also, we have from Masbate. Hello, Mr. Erds Kajoral. Also from Ligao City, Ligao National High School. Hello, Miss Rhea. Also, we have the our viewers from the Ateneo Dinaga University. Hello, Ma'am Leonor. Also, we have viewers from Daat Camarines Norte. So, kamusta po kayo? Sana po okay lang po kayo lahat dyan. So, thank you for your cooperation. Before we formally start, please be guided by the following. Guidelines. Kindly observe proper etiquette in this webinar session. We encourage everyone to participate in the comment section. Only essential questions will be entertained during the Q&A portion due to the limited time. Other questions can be noted in the online evaluation form after the session. So only those viewers who have accomplished or submitted their evaluation form can get their e-certificates right after this webinar. Also, online evaluation form after the session will only be open until 5 p.m. today, July 22, 2020. You will receive your e-certificate shortly after the evaluation. Ateneo Dinaga University, through the College of Computer Studies, the Center in Information Technology Education, and the Ateneo Information and Communications Technology Center, or ICTC, present to you our third webinar series entitled Digital Home Base, Deciding the Right Learning Management System. So I think everyone's excited to learn something new today. So allow me to introduce to you our speaker for this afternoon's webinar. Our resource speaker for this webinar session is a full-time faculty of the Computer Science Department here in Ateneo Dinaga University. He is a graduate of BSIT in 2011 and finished his Master of Science in Computer Science in Ateneo de Manila University in 2018. He did his research on social computing, in particular, collective massive data from social networks. Once data is collected, an analysis is needed to separate the massive data into conversation, topics, and summarize each topic to make glanceable information out of big data. He has 6 research publications, which include a research on students' performance in traditional instruction versus self-paced online learning. Everyone, let us all welcome on screen Mr. Jan Sixto Santos.
Ayan, good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa lahat ng nanonood. Hindi ko kayo nakikita pero sana ko nakikita nyo at naririnig nyo din. Okay. So this afternoon, I was contacted by the ICTC to give you this webinar, to conduct this webinar, and the topic was how to decide between different learning management systems. Okay, so for this afternoon, I am to do just that. No? By the end of this afternoon, you should walk out of this session with the necessary information, the necessary tools to make decisions on which LMSs, learning management systems, to use, and which is appropriate in whatever case you find yourself in. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, ayaw. Ito na lang.
So we would like to apologize for the technical problems. We will fix it as soon as possible. Allow me to share with you the programs offered by the College of Computer Studies here at Ateneo de Naga. For undergraduate programs, we have BS Computer Science, BS Digital Illustration and Animation, BS Information Systems, and BS Information Technology. Also, we have the graduate programs. We have Master of Computer Graphics and Animation, Master of Information Technology, and Master of Science in Computer Science.
Okay, so pasensya na ha. So, medyo nagkaroon tayo ng problem. So, sa mga nanonood dyan, nangyayari talaga to. Okay, so let me get back where I stopped, no? So, our topic today is this one, which is deciding the right learning management system. So, more appropriately, how to decide, how to be critical of learning management systems, and again, how do you find one that fits your situation, that works for whatever locality, whatever circumstances you find yourself in. Okay, now I based this presentation on this paper that you see on the screen, that you can search for in the internet and read for yourself. Okay, so let's begin. So let me just give you a quick outline of what I'm going to present to you in this webinar. So in the next hour or so, I'll be discussing 4 points to everyone here in this webinar. Number one is we need to situate ourselves what is online education and flexibility in online education. Okay, so many of us here probably are teachers. We know what education is. But what exactly is online education, and what does it mean to be a flexible educator and having tools that allow for that flexibility? Next is we're going to define what are learning management systems, why are they necessary, and what's their place and proper usage in an online learning environment. Okay, and after that, we'll be going into it really, which is about how do you evaluate these LMSs critically, and lastly, we'll get to some synthesis. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, let's first talk about online learning and flexibility. Now, here's something that I want everyone to read. Okay, when you see this green slide, read it aloud to yourself. We are compelled to migrate our classes online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, this is a situation that everybody is facing, not just here in the Philippines, but in every corner of the world. I don't think there is a country yet that has opened their schools fully. Okay, the great majority of us are still trying to keep ourselves safe, and this is what we have to do, unfortunately. Okay, now what does this have to do with this lecture? We all know that the pandemic is ongoing, and we're transitioning ourselves to educating our students online. Well, we, the teachers, actually have a lot to do, okay? Because transitioning online from teaching physically is not as easy as it sounds. It's not that you get a computer and then you post videos on YouTube or you post your lectures in Facebook and that's online education. That's not really the case, okay? The transition is not easy. And let me just preface this presentation by saying, I'm going to discuss here learning management systems, but this is only one part of this big transition to online education, okay? But the fact of the matter is, we are the generation of teachers. It fell on our lap. This problem fell on the lap of this generation of teachers, and we are called to use the gift of technology, what we have, to continue our work. Okay. This is a picture that hopefully will make things a little bit more contextualized for you, a little bit more real. On the left is what our classrooms used to look like. Now, there's somebody in front, there's a blackboard, there's kids, and education is happening. They ask questions, you give them answers, you make lectures, you do group works, you do all these sorts of things. We know how to do that. But what does education look like now? Please consult the picture on the right. This is what millions of children, millions of college students, millions of high school students are doing around the world right now. They're in their homes with their computers looking at the screen. Now, how do you suppose this transition is supposed to happen smoothly? From physical classes to online classes, how is that supposed to happen smoothly? Okay. Who's in charge? Who is supposed to make that happen? It's us. Okay, it's us. The problem is transitioning is not easy. Okay, it must be done carefully. Now, why is this the case? Well, no one knows what they're doing. That's just the basic reality. We don't know what we're doing. Scientists don't know what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing because this is so new. This happened so fast. We have to adapt ourselves without knowing very much. We do know some things, but we don't know everything yet. That's why this transition has to be done carefully. From reading books, from writing in notebooks, suddenly, over the course of 2 to 3 months, thousands of years of history and education is thrown out the window. We no longer have books. We no longer use notebooks. Suddenly, they say use tablets, use desktops, use laptops, use cell phones, use the internet, use YouTube. Okay, a thousand years of educational practice, 2 months, nagbago lahat. Okay, so not only is this a time for change, we are actually being forced to change by things that unfortunately we cannot change. Okay? And this requires us to adapt not only ourselves to technology. Now, technology is one part of this change. It's not just adapting to technology, but it's also about reprogramming ourselves to have a new mindset. It requires a new mindset, it requires a new kind of preparation, and it requires the mastery of a new set of tools. Okay, so today we will be looking at the last point in that triple, diba? Mindset, preparation, and tools. Today we're going to focus ourselves on what kind of tools are there and what makes them good, okay, for our situation. Since we have to do this change very rapidly, let's make sure we do it right. Okay, so that's online classes. The transitioning from physical education in classrooms to a more digital computer-based education. Now, fortunately for us, there's no shortage of tools that are available for us to use. Okay, again, many of you here are teachers. You could probably name like 2 to 3 learning management systems or online classrooms that you know. Okay, here are 2 that I know and I use. One is Moodle. The other on the right is the logo for Google Classroom. These are 2 of the most common ones being used around the world. Now, we are fortunate, again, to have these technologies. But we are also unfortunate, diba? We are infortunate because we have hundreds of these tools. Diba? Sabi nga nila, if you have 100 choices to make, it's that decision is more difficult than if you only have 2 or 3 choices to make. Diba? If you have infinite possibilities, the most difficult choice is to choose just one. Okay? So it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing kasi maraming available. It's kind of a curse because choosing between them is a difficult task of itself, in and of itself. It's a difficult question to answer. Now, in order for education to flourish online, we, the teachers, must actually learn how to choose our tools relative to what? Relative to our own situations. Okay, Moodle is good. Google Classroom is good. But as we know from tools, every tool has a purpose. Every tool solves a different problem. Hindi ka naman gagamit ng screwdriver, pampokpok ng pakok, diba? Kaya nga may martilyo para there are tools for every problem. Now, the thing that's missing in our preparation is the ability of us teachers to choose. Okay? We know how to choose between an essay question in an exam versus a multiple choice question. We were taught that in school, maybe we learned that when we were teaching, diba, you use certain types of questions to get certain types of answers that's used for different types of examinations. But in this case, when do you use Moodle? When is Google Classroom the right tool to use? When is Blackboard appropriate? When is just basic email appropriate? Right? That's something that many of us have a difficult time answering. And actually, that's not the case for just us. It's the case for everybody. That's why ang dami-daming choices. Some people say one is the best. Some people say the other is the best. Okay? That's my primary purpose here, is to dispel that. How do we need to look at these things to make a decision? Okay? Now, that leads us to what we call flexible learning. Remember, I said in the previous slide, we have to be aware of our context. We have to be aware of what we have. We have to be aware, and we have to consider what our students have. Okay? We have to consider what kind of students we have. We have to consider what kind of expertise we the teachers have as well. Okay? In order to be successful in online education in this rapid transition we are going through now, we have to adapt, and we have to adapt quickly. Okay. Now, what do we actually have to adapt to? Okay, to be flexible to ourselves and our students. Well, we have to adapt to, for example, may internet ba sila? Okay, their situations. May internet ba sila? Do they know how to use a computer? If they do, what's their degree of expertise? They might know how to use Facebook, but not necessarily Moodle or Google Classroom. Okay, that's what being flexible is about. That's why you need to know what tool to use for every situation. You need to flex to what is needed. Okay, and LMSs, as great as they are not made equal, and each have their own strengths and weaknesses. So that's called flexible learning, di ba? I mean, that term has a wide definition, but for our purposes here, that's what flexible learning means. In order to be flexible, we need to learn our tools. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Why is this important? Because ultimately, what tool we use, what learning management system we use, and how we use it will determine and influence, maybe not determine, but it will greatly influence how well we reach our students. So we have to choose very wisely. Like I said, hindi ka naman gagamit ng screwdriver, pampokpok ng ng pako. Okay? Choose the right tool, the job will be 100 times easy. Okay? Now, the tools and the tech, that's what I just said, sorry. I was a little bit ahead of myself. Okay, but again, pag green slide, let's read that aloud to ourselves. The tools and technology we choose to use will influence how well we can reach our students. And that's our primary goal here. Why did we transition to online classes? Because that's the way to reach children, that's the way to reach our students, is through the technology that binds us, which is the internet and in computers. Okay, so proper tool use. Okay. Now let's talk about what learning management systems are in the first place. Okay, bakit ba kailangan ng learning management system? Okay, bottom line, if you want to conduct your online classes using just emails and even just text messages, you can. Okay, technically speaking, those are still online classes, and that's technically online education. But you're going to have a hard time. Okay? You're going to have a very hard time. Now, what's a learning management system? This is a computer application that allows us to facilitate the delivery of online education smoothly. Okay? So, let's take a deeper look about what these things are. Okay. So, learning management systems, and from here on out, I'm going to refer to them as LMSs. Now, LMSs are what? These are programs. Okay, these might not be programs that run on your computer. They might be on the internet, but they are still programs, and their main function is to help you deliver what you sell. Diba? Essentially, it's education. Diba? It helps you deliver that education to your target, which is the students. Okay. Now, I urge you, we don't have time for it here, but I urge you to actually explore learning management systems on your own. Ang dami-dami, like I said, pumili ka ng isa and try to mess around with it. Now, what will you find in an LMS? An LMS is essentially, just to use as few words as possible, it's an online classroom. Okay? And in an LMS, whether it's Google Classroom, whether it's Moodle, whether it's Blackboard, whether it's Canvas, or kung ano pa mang meron kayong mahanap dyan, all of them, most if not all of them, will include the basic functions expected in an online classroom. Okay? What do I mean when I say that? Well, if you're looking at online or learning management systems as online classrooms that do the jobs of a teacher in a classroom, there's no difference between Moodle, Google Classroom, Canvas, Blackboard. Pare-pareho lang sila. Bakit? If you just intend to use an LMS as an online classroom, there's no point in choosing or putting effort in that decision. Ma'am, sarado mo na lang mata mo, pili ka ng isa, yun na yun. Why? Because all of these systems have grade books. All of them can help you compute your grades. All of them can help you track attendance of your students. You can use all of them to supply handouts and slides and videos to your students. They all can do that. They all can help you post announcements. They all can help you, manage a calendar and appointments. They all can do quizzes and assignments and all those usual things you expect from an online classroom. Diba? It helps you conduct an online classroom. Therefore, every single one of these things have these features. Mapa Moodle, mapa Google Classroom, mapa Canvas, mapa Blackboard. Kung ito lang yung tinitingnan mo, huwag ka na maghanap. Sarado mo na lang mata mo, mamili ka. Kung sa anong mapili mo, yun na yun. They all can do this. Okay. Now, why am I saying that? Because choosing an LMS based on the routine functions of an online classroom is a pointless activity. They all do it. Now, if that's the case, then why are we here? Okay. Pareho lang pala sila. Why are we in a webinar trying to learn how to differentiate between them? Well, you can differentiate between these things, but it's not on the basis of their routine functions, not on the basis of a gradebook, not on the basis of its ability for you to share PDFs and YouTube videos. No, they're all identical in that sense. Now, again, why are we here? How do we meaningfully separate them? Again, to be flexible, we have to know what each of these things do properly in order to address issues in our own domain, in our own circumstances. So what other things do we need to take a look at in terms of the capabilities of an LMS that makes it appropriate to your situation? Now, we are not comparing apples and oranges here. That's what the picture here represents. When you're comparing an LMS, let's say Moodle, you compare Moodle to Google Classroom, it's not like you're comparing apples and oranges. They are not different entities. They are both LMSs. So my term here is we are comparing apples to apples. Okay. But if you think about it, apples, they have the same molecule structure, maybe the same smell, the same taste as another apple. Meron lang silang mga konting differences. Maybe the color is different, but they are the same thing that are separated by subtle characteristics. Okay? So how do we compare LMSs? Lahat sila, sabi ko pare-pareho. Hindi naman pare-pareho, but there are important differences that are not so obvious. Okay? Now, always remember there's a tool for every job. And also remember that all jobs are not the same. You need to know what your tool is. You need to know what to look for in a tool. Okay. Now, to know what is right for you, you have to examine these LMSs beyond the surface. Diba? Ano ba yung laman nila? Now, looking deeper means looking past what these LMSs have in common. Like I said, it's common. Everybody has them. That's not what makes them different. Well, what makes them different? Well, what makes them different is their capability to flex, their capability to address the shortcomings of the teacher, to help with that, and to help with the shortcomings of our students in terms of many different dimensions. We're looking at that and trying to make a decision based on a few grounded, let's just say, philosophies, okay? Which leads us into our main evaluation criteria. Okay. To look deeper, we have to have a sort of ruler. Diba? Because what we're trying to do here is essentially to measure the effectiveness, or not really the effectiveness, but we're trying to measure one LMS against another. And to do a measurement, you have to have a ruler. You have to have a standard measure. Now, in this case, I'm going to introduce to you a very simple and very straightforward evaluation criteria that you can use to evaluate an LMS to determine whether it's appropriate for you or not. Now, is this the only evaluation, what you're going to see? No? Is this the only evaluation criteria available? No. However, I chose this, and this makes sense to me because of two things. Number one, it makes sense to me because there are only 4 criteria in what you're about to see. Why does that make sense to me? Because nobody here is an expert, and we're being asked to do this in a very short amount of time. And I think the brevity of those 4 criteria is in our interest. Okay? So yun, madali siyang i-apply. And then number two, konti yung oras natin. Diba? So that's why I think this is perfect for our situation, being flexible. So what are these evaluation criteria that I'm talking about? Now, the ruler that we use must be based on research. Okay, yung evaluation criteria natin must be based on research. Now, if you go back to my first slide, maybe later I'll try the slides. You'll see there that I said I'm basing this presentation on a particular research paper. This is based on that. Okay, it's an Australian study that came out in 2018. Okay, now, it must be based on research. Again, bakit research? But kailangan based on research? Because again, no one knows what we're doing and we're being asked to do this very quickly. We have to ground ourselves in what little material we have to ground ourselves in, okay, to ensure our chances of success. Now, let's continue. Here's the LMS evaluation criteria that I want everyone here to take into heart. Okay, so when you're evaluating, when you're choosing between different LMSs, there are 4 things that you need to take a look at. Again, not the common things. Forget about that. Pwede ba mag-quiz doon? Pwede ba mag-PDF doon? Pwede kahit saan. Okay, don't mind that. Here's what you actually need to take a look at. Number 1, can the LMS help you pace your class? Okay? Number 2, is the LMS accessible and does it promote accessibility? Number 3, will my students have trouble collaborating with each other and collaborating with me as the teacher? Okay, so these are the things that are usually, well, people think about them, but people usually think about these 4 things second. Ano yung unang tinitingnan ng tao, di ba? Ay, maganda ba yung itsura? Pwede bang mag-quiz? Ay, ang galing, pwede mag-upload ng PDF. Okay, again, so I'm saying this need to be the first thing that you inspect. And this where you spend most of your time actually thinking about whether an LMS actually satisfies these 4 issues or 4 characteristics. Now, of course, here, we're going to go through each one of these things, and I'm going to show you a sample later on. For you as teachers to have this under your belt, and again, to make good decisions that work for you and work for whatever situations your students find themselves in. Okay, so these are the 4 aspects of an LMS that must be inspected beyond the routine features. Okay, now for more on these, please consult the article I posted in the beginning. Okay, now let's first talk about pace. Okay? Now, what is pace before we even get to the definition? Diba, pacing means, diba, pag sabi nila magbo-buffet ka, kakain kayo sa buffet, pace yourself. Diba, ibig sabihin, control the way you eat in a buffet because if you eat too much, you won't get to taste everything. Diba? So, what's pacing in an online classroom or in online education? Well, pace refers to the velocity of your syllabus delivery and the volume of work given to students. But 2 V's, the velocity and volume of your online class. Ibig sabihin ng velocity is, in a syllabus, how fast do you intend to move from topic to topic? That's the velocity of the class. And the volume is, per topic, how much work do you give to your students? Okay, it's important to control pace because, well, number 1, if your class is going too fast, students will get left behind. If you're giving too much work, same thing, students will get left behind. And in a real classroom, not real, but in a physical classroom, we do this every day. Diba? We control, we adapt to the speed of our students. If they're getting the material, we can go a little bit faster. If they're having trouble, we can go a little bit slower. Diba? We can sometimes go back. But we know how to do that in a physical classroom. And we know that that's important. But the thing is, can your LMS actually support the pacing of an online class well? Does it allow you to actually set the pace of your online class? Does it allow you, does the LMS allow you to control the pace of your online class? Now, again, this is something that is not common across all LMSs. Okay? Many of them actually have pace controls, but each of these LMSs implements that control a little bit differently. Now, what works for you, we'll find out what you need to look for, not to get what works for you. Okay, so can the LMS actually help you control the velocity and the volume of your online classes? Now, why is good pacing important in an LMS? Number one thing that you have to understand, laos na po yung millennials. Ako po, millennial. Mga millennials po, graduate na po kami. Okay? Ang mga estudyante nyo ngayon are Gen Z. Okay? Or the Zoomers. Diba? Now, one characteristic that describes Gen Z is they are time poor, at least when it comes to school. Anong ibig sabihin ng time poor? Hindi naman sila salat sa oras, but they are bad time managers. Okay? Which means they prefer things that they can finish in the shortest amount of time possible. Okay? They ignore work typically that they perceive to be time consuming. You notice that all over the place. Kaya nga, di ba, nauso yung TikTok? Kasi maigsi lang yung mga video. 10 seconds, 30 seconds, tatawa na sila. Instead of generation namin na mag-YouTube ka pa, manunod ka pa ng matagal para tumawa. Yung TikTok, 10 seconds lang tatawa ka agad. That's their personality. Now, excuse me. Why is that important when we are talking about pace here? What does being time poor have to do with that? Well, improper pacing, meaning miscalculation of the syllabus velocity, miscalculation of the volume, what happens if it's too, let's say, your lectures or your syllabus delivery is too big, diba? The work is too much. Well, they won't do it. Diba? They are time poor. If they perceive some work to be time consuming, they leave it behind. And what happens when students leave this work behind? They have to catch up. And when they do that, the work that they have to catch up on piles and piles and piles. Kaya time poor nga sila, so it gets worse and worse and worse. Diba? Catch up is not a viable strategy for the kinds of students we have today, which are the Zoomers. They can catch up. So if they already ignored work, and then more work. So doesn't really work. So you have to have very good pacing in LMS in order for it to function as best as it can. Now, is this important again? Let me add here, every class works well with the different pace. Okay. You can't just create an online class, set a pace, and that's it. Depending on your sections, you may have to tune the pace a little bit here, maybe a little slower here, a little bit faster for this class. Next year, iba na naman yung pace. And in the middle of a class, diba? Sometimes you have to go faster, you have to go slower. You have to have good controls as far as the pace of an LMS is concerned. Okay. Now, excuse me. How do you check if an LMS has good pace control? Dito tayo. Diba, yung picture dyan, it's relevant here. The turtle and the rabbit that raced. Diba? Tapos, ang kwento, natulog daw yung rabbit kasi nauna siya ng masyado. Tapos, naunahan tuloy siya. Well, medyo may pagkaganyan yung Zoomers. Okay, Gen Z, yung mga time poor. Dire-diretso sila kasi madaling tumakbo, tatakbo na sila. Pero pag nalaman nilang malayo pala, titigil na. Okay? So, pacing is important here to get to the end. Now, here are the things you need to look for in an LMS to determine if it has pacing controls and if it has good pacing controls. Okay. Number one, can you deliver your materials and coursework modularly? Diba? Modularity in a syllabus and the way you deliver your materials is the primary way you control pace. Diba? If you want your students to consume the material faster, you usually give it in smaller chunks. Diba? You don't give everything at once and then just dump them on the student. Ang tanong is, can you do that effectively in an LMS? Can you modularize your syllabus and deliver it modularly? Okay? So when you see an LMS, check to see if that's there. Okay? Number 2, can you control how these modules are created and presented? What does that mean? Can you control what things go in a module? Pwede bang dalawang video, isang PDF? Pwede bang lahat video? Can I put assignments inside the module? Okay. Can I provide a Google conferencing link inside the modules? Can I arrange how these modules look in my LMS? Okay. Do you have control of that or not? Okay. Can you control the creation process and the presentation method of your modules? Okay. Number 3 thing that you need to take a look at when it comes to pacing controls. Can you control how your students see these modules? Can you actually get them to look at your modules in the first place? Diba? Because in an online class, I'll show you some examples after this slides. Usually, ang ginagawa dati is nilalagay lang lahat ng mga items in a giant list. Then sabihin sa student, o yan, basahin nyo yan. It doesn't really work. Again, you have to control the pace. So you have to, you have to modularize it. You have to control how they are presented. And you have to make sure that your students actually see them. Okay? Can you control that? That's number 3. Pag hindi nakita ng students, they won't really do it. They don't know what to pay attention to given so much they need to do. They need to guide attention to pace them properly. Okay? Number 4, can your students easily find and consume these modules? Does the LMS support this? Diba? Controlling the visibility of your modules, which is number 3. But more importantly is, does the LMS actually support the modular consumption of each element in the module, diba? So again, to pace the students properly. How much control do you have in these 4 things? That's what I call, that's what the paper calls, that I expanded. That's what we call pacing controls in an LMS. So that's the first thing you take a look at when you are deciding what LMS to use. Okay. Now, for the case of Moodle and Google Classroom, they have these controls, but they implement them differently. Okay. Now, I'd like to show you an example of pacing controls in both Google Classroom and Moodle. Okay. So let me change over to that window. Now, let me show you first what this looks like in Google Classroom, I suppose, because that's what most of us are familiar with, right? Okay. Let me share this back. Share ko muna to while I'm opening this. Okay. So pacing control. So if you are already familiar with LMSs, please ask yourselves this question. And especially for those who have used LMSs before or nag-online class na kayo before, ang tanong ko sa inyo ngayon is, did you actually take advantage of the LMS did you were able to take advantage of the pacing controls for the LMS that you used? Okay. Yeah. So let me show you this Google Classroom example. Okay. So, click tayo dito. And then, ayan. Okay. So let me share my screen. Let me show you a Google Class. Okay. So this is a Google Classroom. And what you will see here is I am enrolled in a class called Trends in Application Development, which is one of the classes I actually teach in college, or I taught last summer. So let's see what this online classroom looks like. And let me show you where the pacing controls exist within this classroom. Now, if I go to this classroom, what I will see here is in the first page of the classroom, we see here that this is called the class stream. This is like Facebook, di ba? May mga nagpo-post and they all appear in this stream in chronological order, starting from the newest post to the oldest post. Now, what we will see here is, well, I made this, so pasensyahan nyo na. The teacher, yan, is actually posting, sabi niya, nandito, new topic announcement. Lecture 3.1 is posted on the classwork section. So notice that this teacher, again, ako yan, please forgive the self-promotion. No self-promotion intended. But you see what I did here is, I didn't post, an entire book chapter. I didn't post the book. What did I post? A small part of something larger where I controlled what I shared, when I shared it, and how I shared it. Kasi sabi dito, nasa classwork section daw. So pag nakita to ng student, ay may bagong module. Let me go to the classwork section. And if I go to the classwork section, what I'll see here is, ito yung nakalagay doon, no? Introduction to Ruby daw. Okay? So, ito pala ay may video lecture. Pwede kong panoorin yung video lecture. Ay may assignment pala yung module. Okay? Ay, meron palang discussion yung assignment after I submit it. Now, who set this? Diba? Who made this module? It was the instructor. I made that. Okay? And I made sure that this instruction or this module appeared at the top para pagbukas ng students sa coursework, makikita nila. And when we are done with this, I'll move it down and replace it with something else. Okay? I control how much I give to the students. I control how much information, how much material they get. Okay? So, kung babalikan natin yung slides, diba? Ayan. It's visible. I can control the size of this module. I can add more or take out certain things if I think it's too big. That's up to me, the teacher. I have pacing control. I can ensure that my students are not overloaded quite easily. Okay, students can even search for topics here, which again, it's about visibility and that's pacing controls. Okay, now, let me go back to my slide. Okay. So that's pacing controls. I hope that made sense to everybody. Okay, can you deliver your materials modularly? Can you control how they are presented? Diba? In what I just showed you, it's the order. Okay, aning nasa taas, aning nasa baba, aning important, aning hindi important. Okay, can you control how your students will see these modules? Diba? I posted something in the class stream to point them in the right direction na may bagong module, diba? And then number 4, can they easily find this? Okay, in Google Classroom, just click that coursework section and look at what's highlighted. That's what you do. Okay? You have control over pacing. Okay? So moving forward, let's talk about accessibility. Now, what's accessibility? Now, it refers to the characteristic of an LMS to function effectively given the differences in ability of our students, ability or circumstances of its users, which are our students. The question here is, can your students actually reach the material you are providing? Can they avail of the service you are providing? Baka nagtuturo ka, wala naman palang nanonood. Diba? Maybe they can't access your material as effectively as they would want to or as easily as would be effective. Okay? Can my LMS be accessed by students effectively and consistently? Okay, why is that important? Now, you have to accept the fact that students come from all walks of life. Even here now, again, I can't see you guys, but Siguro may isa, dalawa, tatlo, 10 diyan na nagpuputol-putol yung internet. May isa, dalawa, 10 diyan na hindi maganda yung monitor. May isa, dalawa, tatlo diyan na walang speaker. May isa diyan siguro dalawa, tatlo walang microphone. Okay? May iba diyan na sa cellphone nanonood, may iba diyan na nanonood sa tablet. May bagong tablet, may lumang tablet. Okay? May naka-mobile data, may naka-fiber. Okay? So that's what impact does that have towards an online class? Well, it's not very accessible if it can't work with the majority of how people try to access your service. Okay? Hindi ka pwedeng mag-drive ng tricycle sa lugar na puro pataas, di ba? Wala naman tricycle ata sa Baguio if I'm not mistaken. Bakit? Tricycles can't access tops of mountains and things like that with heavy loads, di ba? You have to have the right tool to reach your goal. Now, in this case, we have to accept the fact that not everybody has the same amount of resources. But to be flexible, you have to lean towards the disadvantage, di ba? You have to make sure that your LMS can still accept them into the online class, di ba? Another thing that forms divisions between students, rather than what station in life they're in, is their varying backgrounds in computer skills. Like I said in the beginning, siguro most students know how to use Facebook and post photos and post status updates, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to use or they can use learning management system. Okay? They might know how to use a touchscreen but have no idea how to use a mouse. Okay? So you have to take them again, lean into their disadvantage and help them be part of the online class. And also language. What do I mean when I say varying backgrounds in language? Not everyone speaks perfect English. Okay? Sometimes they are more comfortable in Tagalog or Bicol or Ilocano or Cebuano or whatever language they speak, especially for smaller children. English can be more of a divider than a uniter. Okay? So promoting accessibility means you have to have something to help you with that. Okay? And the last point here on the right about why good accessibility is necessary in an LMS is your syllabus itself, the materials you want to post, your activities, your slides, whatever, may contain requirements or may need special resources that your students may not have to accomplish. Okay? So accessibility means closing that divide. That's why good accessibility is important in an LMS, but what do you look for in an LMS that will help you address accessibility issues? Excuse me. Now, pictures here, look at that. Cell phone. Bakit yan yung nakalagay dyan? Because this is the most common way that students access the internet. Okay? Cell phones. First thing you need to learn when you're saying you want to promote wide accessibility, ask yourself this. Does your LMS or can the LMS be used with a mobile phone? Okay? If it can't, it's probably not a good LMS. Okay? Why? Most students don't have laptops. Okay? All they have are their mobile phones and their mobile internet. And that's the way they access the system. Does your LMS serve that market? And does it serve that market well? Will it be able to work with a cell phone? But at the same time, it also has to work well with a laptop. It has to work well with a tablet. And it has to work well with rental computers and internet cafes. Okay? So, minsan, cell phone, maybe it's not even that good of a cell phone that looks like a very expensive cell phone. Will it work with a regular cell phone? Will it work, the second image there on the top right corner, will it work with an old computer or do you need some sort of fancy computer to make it work? Okay, that's point number one. You have to make sure that it can work with as wide of a device target as possible. Okay? This is not a syllabus class, okay? But siguro I need to make this point. You have to also make sure that your syllabus and the coursework you give works with cell phones as well, not just the LMS. Okay? That's number one. Number two, does your LMS work well with people with intermittent internet connections, or does it only work well for people who have consistent internet connections? Okay. Aside from the device, the other great divide that we have is our access to the internet. No? Now, many of us are fortunate to have really good internet that work well 90% of the time. But there's a reason why you hear this news na hindi daw maganda yung internet. It's because it's true. There are still many places in the country that don't have good infrastructure when it comes to telecommunications, and even when they do, it all depends on how much money you're willing to spend to get that good internet connection, which of course not everybody is so fortunate. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, you have to look at the LMS that you're planning to use. Does this thing work even if my students can only access the internet every once in a while? Okay, of course, there's nothing we can do if they don't have internet at all. That's another problem. But I'm assuming here intermittency versus consistency. Now, anong ibig sabihin nun? There are LMSs that focus mainly on video lectures. Okay? That doesn't make much sense if the students you have don't have consistent internet connections. Diba? That doesn't make sense. Okay? Or for example, nag-survey ka, and according to your survey to your students, meron silang consistent internet connection. Okay? That informs you a little bit of what you need to look for in an LMS. Okay? Look for that in an LMS. Number 3, is your LMS, this is important, is your LMS considered user-friendly by your students? This addresses the differences in computer skills and language skills of your students. Now, what does user-friendliness mean? A program is user-friendly if it can be used without a manual. Diba? Pansin nyo yung mga bata ngayon, bigyan mong cellphone, wala lang instruction. They know what to do. Diba? They know what buttons to press. They don't know what to do to take pictures. They know how to install apps and things like that. Diba? Why? Because these mobile devices were built to be user-friendly, and the definition of that, a quick definition of that is, you don't need the manual. That's user-friendly. Okay. This is where many LMSs actually differ a lot. Some of them are very user-friendly. Some of them not so user-friendly. I'll show you a sample later. But ito lang siguro a quick rule of thumb. The more user-friendly a system is, an LMS, actually any program, the more user-friendly a program is, usually the less features it has. And the more features it has, the less user-friendly it is. Diba? Isipin mo na lang, kung may motor ka, ano bang kailangan mo sa motor? Accelerator, brake, yun lang. Pero pag nagda-drive ka ng airplane, ang daming pindutan. Of course, a plane can do a lot more things than a motorbike. And that requires more buttons, more features. Yeah? It's harder to operate, but it's more powerful. For simple devices, simple programs, it's the opposite. Less things to press. It only does a few things, but it's more simple. So you have to find the middle ground. Where do you actually fall into that spectrum as a teacher? Are you more comfortable with a more powerful system, but more complicated, or less powerful system, but simpler? You as the teacher, but at the same time, you consider your students as well. Okay. In my case, I mostly teach college level computer science and IT students. So I have no problem giving them the most complicated software known to man, and I expect them to decipher that because that's what they're supposed to do. Okay, but it's a different case when you're targeting high school students. It's a different case for elementary and even younger. And also your location. Is this a location that has a lot of internet, a lot of computers, diba? The temperament of the student. Okay, user-friendliness has to be selected properly because again, if it's not user-friendly enough for who you're targeting. The LMS is more of a burden than a helpful tool. Okay? And also, another point I'd like to make for number 3, if at all possible, try to find an LMS with strong localization support, meaning you can translate the LMS to your native language or to their mother tongue, di ba? Kung sa Bicol tayo, mga Bicolano, especially for the younger children, instead of pure English, click this to submit. Diba? Maybe you can translate that to Bicol. Some LMSs allow that. Your menu items and your buttons, you can rename them and you can translate them into a language that is more understandable to your target market. Okay? Number 4, does your LMS integrate well with your pedagogical tools? This is important. Now, what does that mean? In your syllabus, di ba, you have your coursework, things that you ask your students to do. The question is, does the LMS actually support the tools they will use to accomplish what you ask them to do? Okay. You say to your students, write an essay about this topic. Tanong, can the LMS actually capture that essay? Is it easy for the students to actually make that essay with the tools provided by your LMS? Why? If it doesn't, and you require them to use something outside of the LMS, what does that do? It adds another step in the process. It increases the transaction cost. It's not very accessible. Again, they might know how to use the LMS, but that doesn't know they know how to use Microsoft Office, diba? Microsoft Word, or any of those sort of other programs. Okay? Thus, your pedagogical tools, meaning your essays, your questioning tools, diba? Does that work well with the LMS? Okay? If you're the type of person who likes discussion sessions, diba? Congregations and discussing them together as a class, you might need a teleconferencing application. The question is, does that teleconferencing application work well with your LMS? Now, in the case of Google Classroom, it does, because Google has its own teleconferencing app, Google Meet. But in the case of, for example, Moodle, if you use Moodle and part of your syllabus is a group discussion, so you have to teleconference, what do you have to do? You have to go outside of Moodle and learn a whole different other program. And that's just you. Your students have to do the same. Diba? And you're not there to guide them. It just causes confusion. Does your LMS integrate well with your pedagogical tools as well? Okay, to promote accessibility. Now, just like this picture at the lower, andun sa kabilang side, doon, in the lower right portion of my slide here, this is a ramp that people in wheelchairs use. Diba? We adapt the environment to serve them as well. No, not just the people with 2 legs that can walk, but to serve everybody as much as possible equally. Okay, these 4 things are what we look for in an LMS. Okay, now in the interest of time, I'm just going to move forward. Okay, let's talk about the 3rd criteria, which is student agency. Now, what is student agency? Well, in online classes, we have what we call synchronous and asynchronous meetings. Synchronous meetings mean that you and your students meet at the same time, di ba? You are co-located in time. You might not be co-located in space, but you are co-located in time. Yun yung mga Skype, mga video chat, video conferencing, di ba? All of you go to this video chat and then you exchange your ideas. That's called synchronous meetings. Time flows in the same pace. Now, time is the same for all of you. Meron namang asynchronous. Ano naman yung ibig sabihin ng asynchronous? It means that time is not synchronized, di ba? Their time is not your time. You have 2 different working time areas, di ba? Ibig sabihin nun is when you give an assignment, they do it on their own time. Di ba? The teacher does something else, they do it at home. That's asynchronicity. Now, in online classes, these 2 elements actually work together. Sometimes you have sessions where you can do it synchronously. Sometimes you have to do things asynchronously. Students need to do the work at home or by themselves. Now, student agency addresses specifically the power of students to actually perform tasks asynchronously, di ba? Agency, their ability to move, their ability to move themselves without supervision, di ba? Independently. And the question is, does your LMS actually support student independence and self-motivation? And not all of them do this. And for all the LMSs that have features for student, promoting student agency, they implement them in different ways. Now, what is student agency? It refers to the promotion of the qualities of self-motivation, independence, and conviction in students. Okay? Can your students continue their online education in a solitary environment? Because let's face it, if you're in an online class, it's just you and a computer, just like me right now. I'm just in a room with a computer in front of my face. Essentially, I'm talking to myself. Okay? This is the situation, kayo din, ganun din naman siguro, no? This is the situation that your students actually are facing, no? Hours of the day. Hindi naman klase mo lang yung meron sila. Di ba? That's a false idea we have to remove from our heads. It's not just your class they're attending. They might have 5 or 6 different online classes. So, they have to spend hours and hours and hours in front of a screen. The thing is, given that and the amount of work that they have to do, will they actually do it? Diba? Are they supported by the LMSs in their asynchronous work? Okay? Now, why is promoting strong agency, student agency, important in an LMS? Okay. Well, yun na nga, sabi ko kanina, large portions are done asynchronously and they need self-motivation. They need independence and they need conviction to actually do the work. And the LMS has to support and nurture that. Diba? It has to reward in conviction in students. It has to reward and allow for self-motivated students to work on their own at their own pace. Okay? It's important also because exploration and the consumption of material continues after class. Please remember that hindi lang dapat natututo yung mga estudyante natin pag nasa classroom sila. Okay, they have to learn actually more when they are outside of the classroom. That only happens if they have agency. Okay, so you have to support that. Oh, sorry. Now, another important reason why student agency is important in an LMS is ownership. Okay, they have to own the class. They have to own the work they need to do and the work they've done and the progress they've made in a class. Diba? That sense of ownership will take you from the start of the class to the end of the class. Because if they're not attached to the work that they do, they're not going to do it. Diba? They have to take ownership of the things that they submit, take ownership of the comments that they make, take ownership of the lectures that they attended, the things that they've learned. Okay? That's fostered by good agency, student agency, students that have self-motivation, independence, and conviction. LMSs need to support that now. What do you look for in an LMS as far as student agency is concerned? Number one, the LMS must continue or encourage students to continue the learning experience after class hours. There must be active encouragement that those features must exist inside the LMS. Now, what form does this usually take? Okay, how do you encourage students to learn after quote-unquote class hours? Essentially, what this means is learning on their own. Well, the LMS has to allow students to exchange ideas between themselves. But the LMS has to be able to supply material to the students whenever they need it. Okay? So that also relates to number 2, where students must be able to share thoughts. But if they are so involved in a discussion, they feel the agency, again, that word is very important, the agency to start sharing their insights, they must be able to do that. Okay? If they write something that they think is very good or they want everyone to see their work, again, taking ownership, they must be able to share that material with minimal involvement from the teachers. That's number 2. The LMSs must be able to do this. Now, number 3, the LMS must allow students to work at their own pace. That's important for agency. And also flexibility. Some work faster, some work slower. Again, computer, cell phones, iba-iba yung device natin. So, allow them to work at their own pace so that they feel empowered to work more. Diba? What happens if you give a 5-day deadline, hindi nila natapos? Kasi problems. Well, they get discouraged. They don't have agency anymore. They're not self-motivated because the reward is not there. Na they made this effort, hindi umabot. Why am I going to do it again? Diba? So allow them to work at their own pace as much as possible. Of course, we also have to set our deadlines, but as much as possible, allow them to work on their own pace. Okay? And last is students must be able to brand their work with their own personality, meaning they have to be attached to their work. Okay? Does the LMS allow them to do that? Okay? In Google Classroom, that's very easy to see kasi whenever you make a comment, your name is beside that that comment, and whenever you submit something, your name is attached to that. Oh, John submitted this work on time. Whenever you're using Google Meet to do conferencing, your name is there when you speak. Ay, si sir or si mami nagsasalita o si John nagsasalita. Okay? Allow them to take ownership. And also this involves the grade books as well. Diba? We have to track their progress. They have to self-track their own progress, and that promotes agency. Okay? Ken, ito pa isang example lang, number 4. Can the teacher comment on what the students submit? Diba? Kasi pag nag-submit sila, tapos sinabi mo, very good. Diba? Then the student takes ownership of that. Ay, maganda pala yung ginawa ko. Sabi ni sir, sabi ni ma'am. Okay? So, can the LMS support that action? Not all of them can. Ang hindi gumagawa nito ng mabuti is Moodle. Okay? I wanted to show you, but I don't have Moodle at the moment. But in Moodle, it's very good in pacing. Moodle is very good for accessibility, but not so much this. Okay? Yeah. Especially number 4. Okay. So that's strong student agency. Okay. Now let's get to number 4 in the interest of time. I'm running out of time here. So number 4, collaboration. Now, what is collaboration? It refers to the ability of students to engage in productive, emphasizing productive peer-to-peer exchanges and a sense of belongingness. Now, this is asking the question, how does my LMS instill a sense of community to my students? Is the LMS capable of being or becoming a community and not just a program or a website that they visit? Can it become a community? And that primarily happens if there's a strong sense of collaboration, meaning students can work with other students with minimal effort, and that they sense that they belong. They sense that there's a group and that they have a place in that group. Okay? Can the LMS help you make your students feel that they exist in a community of learners? Okay? So why are these features important? Well, lahat naman siguro tayo dito teachers, and we know that the social dimension is never divorced from good education. They always come together. There is no quality education without a social dimension. No matter what you think of it, diba? Laging may social dimension. Nobody learns in isolation. Okay? Kaya nga, problema natin to, isolated tayo. Kasi dapat walang sense of isolation. So maybe we are physically isolated but not intellectually, and especially in our field in education. Okay? Can the LMS support that? That's important. Now, number 2, why is this necessary? Is good collaboration in an LMS. Research studies have shown over and over again that help-seeking behavior is strongly associated with success. People who know when to ask for help become successful. Okay? Who do you ask for help? It's usually your social network. Okay? Not Facebook. I mean, people you actually know in real life. If you have a problem, you ask your friends who you think can help you. Which essentially means social support. And social support is intimately tied to student success. Okay, we are having problems with the mental health of our students, di ba? Many of those problems can be solved if only we had better social support in terms of families and extended families and friends, di ba? What more now where our mentally, let's just say, shaky students were like that before, and right now they're isolated. That doesn't sound good. Okay, so providing a good social support is very important in learning and their mental well-being. And number 3, teacher presence. Pansin nyo, we are just now talking about the teacher. Teacher presence is not felt when you're pacing your class. It's not felt too much in student agencies, not felt too much in accessibility. Where is teacher presence primarily felt? By the students. How do you make them feel that you are there in a classroom? It's when you collaborate with them, when you do peer-to-peer exchanges. Okay, meaning you say something, they say something back. You provide a comment, they thank you. Okay, you provide a critique, they provide a critique. You have a conversation. That social dimension, that aspect is how you make yourselves felt to the entire class again, to instill a sense of community. And number 4, collaboration tools are important because when you form a community of learners, diba, when peer-to-peer exchanges and conversations happen without being sparked, diba, they just happen naturally because the LMS supports it and encourages it. It starts forming what we call a herd. Diba, a herd, parang herd of cows, diba, mga grupo ng cow, a herd. Why is that important? Well, as human beings, as social creatures, following a herd is instinct to us. And not only us, but many other animals. The birds exist in quote-unquote herds. Dogs herd together, diba? Cats herd together, and fish exist in schools, diba? Things like that. Social structures exist all over nature. Now, what's that important here? Well, if you can establish a herd, and you can make that herd move in a direction, what happens to the followers of the herd? They also follow that same direction, di ba? Positive social pressure that's only available to you if you can make a community. If you can make that herd, you can take that herd and move it forward, di ba? Move it towards your syllabus, move it towards your objectives. And to do that, you need good collaboration tools. Okay? Now, what do you look for in an LMS as far as promoting smooth collaboration? Okay. Number 1, the LMS must be able to project the teacher's presence in the class. Meaning, as the teacher, you can insert yourselves in as many spots as possible, di ba? You can comment on assignments. Diba? You can comment on discussions between students. You can post messages like what I showed you before in the Google Classroom stream. You can post messages. Diba? The LMS must set you up as the authority, set you up as the teacher, and it must promote your presence in all aspects of the system. It's not just you are the face in a video giving a lecture. You're also there in the comments. You're also there in the gradebook. You're also there in the splash screen. Baka kapag login pa lang nila, nandun ka na. Okay? The LMS must help you do that. It must have those features that allow you to do that. Okay? Number 2, students must have the ability to connect with you, the teacher, and their peers easily. That's the key part. You can always email each other. No problem. Pwede naman kayo mag-text, mag-call. Walang problema. You can do that. But that's not very easy because it requires you to go outside of the LMS, get another device, another program, and go through another set of transactions. And, the more transaction costs there are to a transaction, the less likely students are going to complete the transaction. So, mas maganda nasa loob na ng LMS. If they have a question to you, they should be able to contact you as easy as possible. Okay? If they have something to say, if your students have a question, if they're confused about something, the less time they spend in that confused state, the less time it takes for them to reach you, the better their outcomes will be. Okay, and the stronger that bond is between you, the teacher, and your students, and to anybody else in the class that these students are talking to. Okay, this includes also systems in an LMS that allow group discussions like teleconferencing and forum support. Okay, look for that. How good it is, how easily can the students do this, and you as well. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, there must be a place to share ideas and resources related to the class. Now, mistake number 1 for many teachers doing online classes is they think it's their class and the students are just in it. Diba? Klase ko to, nandito lang kayo. That's not a good perspective to take. It's supposed to be a community, which means you can post materials, you can talk to them, but you must also allow them to talk to you. Okay? And to do that, there must be something in the LMS that allows the students to do that. Okay? Usually, what forms does this take? Number 1, community forums where you can post and they can post and you can talk in terms of threads. No, kung alam niyo yung Reddit, kung nakapag-Reddit na kayo or Stack Overflow or Quora, those are examples of forums. Diba? Someone posts a question and then that question is followed by discussions of people within that website. Okay? Maganda bang gumamit ng Quora? Maganda kung nasa Quora ka na. Pero ang problem ko kasi is if you're in Moodle, for example, why do you have to go outside of Moodle? Again, reducing the transaction cost. There should be something inside the LMS that has that feature built in. Okay, so you don't have to go out and learn a whole other tool. Nandun na lahat. Okay, so that place must be there. So sa Google Classroom, meron tayong Google Meet for teleconferencing. Meron din yung Jamboard. If you don't know what Google Jamboard, 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 it's like a blackboard that students and yourself can post sticky notes. So parang pwede kayong mag-stick doon na kung ano. I learned that recently. Another thing in Google is the comment section of every post in Google Classroom. Pag nagpo-post ng video yung teacher, pwede mag-comment sa ilalim yung students and even the teacher as well. So it's more granular comment exchanges kasi per topic. But there must be something like this inside an LMS that is available for you to use. Okay? Sharing ideas. Number 4, the students must be able to see the social interactions happening in a class. Okay. Now, what is this? In online classes, when a student submits, for example, a project to you, let's say you ask them to write an essay, and they submit that to you. What do you do as the teacher? You give it a grade. What should you do as a teacher? Give it a grade and put something personal there. Good job. I like the way you write. Okay. Keep it up. Diba? That's encouragement. Now, if you do that in a classroom, it's fine. You give it to your students, all the students get their own paper. What happens after the class ends? Oy, anong nakuha mo? Anong sinulat sa'yo ni teacher? Diba? Ganun ang ginagawa. Okay. So it becomes a social experience. Oy, very good sa'yo. Ay, sa akin, better luck next time lang. Diba? Or, ikaw, ilan ba score mo? Diba? We do that. Diba? Ano ba? Sagot sa number 2. So inside the classroom, it's not a social experience. But outside the classroom, it becomes a social experience. But in an online classroom, that outside the classroom experience doesn't exist. Okay? That's what I mean here for number 4. Make sure that interactions between groups of people can be seen. Now, why is that important? Of course, to the people inside, that group that's interacting, they don't have a problem. They're already interacting, but that's important for people who are not part of that group to see that there is a structure that they can belong to, enter, and maybe even just observe. Again, developing that sense of community. Kahit minsan, may grupo dun sa malayo, it's important to see that there's a group, to know that you are a part of something bigger, or there's something that you can join, or something that you can participate in. So these social interactions need to be visible. That's why forums are good. That's why comment sections are good, because even if you don't comment yourself, if you don't write comments yourself, if you see people commenting, you're part of a community. And at some point, if there's ever anything that you need to share, you know that there are people there that will listen and, maybe comment back at you. Okay, moderating comments is a whole other issue, but it is important. That's for smooth collaboration. Okay, so is it grade books, attendance management systems, the ability to give quizzes, calendars? Is that what makes an LMS great? No. Okay, no. What makes them great? Their implementations of pacing, accessibility, student agency features, and collaboration features. The grade books and things like that, that's what makes an LMS an LMS. But what makes an LMS great are these four things. And that's, as I said, why I like these four things, because they are easy to remember and easy to deploy. Okay? We don't have time to become experts because the semester starts next week. Okay? So, four things I think is not that hard to understand and use, and to get yourselves to become an evaluator of LMSs yourself. Okay? So let's get to the synthesis at medyo overtime na ako. So is an LMS necessary for online education? Yes. Okay? Yes. Emailing a PDF to your students is not online education. That's just an email to your students. Okay? To actually provide an educational experience of sufficient quality, an LMS is a necessary tool. Are all LMSs made equal? No. They have the same core features, but as you have seen, it's not what makes them great and even appropriate in your situation. So what do we look for in an LMS? Make sure that all the basic functions are there, but after that, these four things are what you look for next. Controls for pacing, easy accessibility, strong student agency, and different modes of collaboration. And here in the conclusion, as the generation, this particular generation is the first to face this kind of abrupt change, we must ensure the success and well-being of our students, given what we have, and ensure the future of the teaching professions. Okay? So over this lecture, you are armed with a little bit more knowledge than when you started. Please use it wisely. Check the LMSs that you use before you use them and make sure it's the right tool for the job. And remember that learning management systems enable good pacing and wide accessibility, which fosters good communication, good collaboration, and strong student agency, which ultimately leads to what we all want, which is quality education for everybody. Okay? And that's the conclusion of my talk. So this has been John Santos from Ateneo. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Sir John, for sharing with us your expertise. That was very insightful and very informative. I'm sure our participants have well understood the topics you discussed for this afternoon. At this point, we will now entertain questions from the comment sections. So, yung may mga questions po, comment lang po ninyo sa comment box. So we have question from Sir Melvin. Does LMS works in a multi-grade school?
Ayun. So, si Sir Melvin, can it work in a multi-grade school? I'm assuming here what that means is a school that has, grade 1 students, grade 2 students, grade 3 students. Yes, it works. I'm not an expert on all the LMSs that exist, no, but from what I know, primarily, which is Moodle and Google Classroom, they can work in a system with multi-grade schools. In Moodle, it's easier to do that kasi you have more control over separations of the grade, di ba? In grade levels, grade 1 dito lang kayo, grade 2 dito lang kayo. Moodle is better at that. But as far as accessibility is concerned, I believe for children, especially my elementary children, Google Classroom would be better. But both of them will work. Thank you for that question. Actually don't know of elementary schools who use LMSs. Parang ngayon ko palang naririnig nung nag-start tong pandemic natin. No? Sana maging successful lahat.
So our next question would be from Ma'am Julieta. Can we both use Noodle and Google at the same time? What could be the consequence? Anyway po.
Siyempre, ma'am, pwede ka naman mag-noodles habang nag-Google Classroom. Pero siguro Moodle ata yun. No? Question ni ma'am, pwede bang mag-Moodle tapos mag-Google Classroom at the same time? Of course, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. However, it would be best to stick to one. Actually, it would be best if an institution sticks to one platform only, unless it's absolutely necessary. Because again, the idea is reducing the amount of cognitive information that the students need to actually use a system. Diba? Reducing the transaction cost. Because if you have to learn two things at the same time. You have to learn how to use this and you have to learn how to use that. And if they're just accomplishing the same goals, diba? Why two? Diba? So, yes, you can do that, but you have to have very good reasons to do that, is what I would say.
So our next question would be, how do we encourage students to participate more? Despite using different platforms, I find it challenging to encourage them. From Mom Elizabeth.
Okay, how do we encourage students to participate more? That's a difficult question. Medyo it's a bit beyond my expertise, but if you ask me, how do you encourage them to do something? Well, first find out who they listen to, and then do what that person does. Kanina ba sila nakikinig? Oh. Usually ngayon, ang mga bata, kanina ba sila nakikinig sa mga YouTube, di ba? Why not watch the same channels they watch and try to adopt the same strategy? How do these people influence their tastes, di ba? May mga pauso-pauso, di ba? Gayaan mo na lang yung ginagawa ng mga nagpapauso. Find what they like and try to present that to them and use it to give a twist to your educational material. Siguro ganun na lang. Di ba? Find what they like and use that to make the material more palatable, more attractive to them. Siguro.
Question from Mom Mary Grace. Does an LMS work for SPED pupils who are maximally prompted?
Eto din. I'm not an expert on SPED and I don't even know what maximally prompted means. But if I'm not mistaken, SPED means our children enrolled in a special education program. Diba? Now, what I can say is there are ways to customize your LMSs to work for different kinds of adaptations that our SPED children need. Perhaps if they are visually impaired, there are ways to customize an LMS to make the fonts bigger. If you need to use screen readers, if you need to display things in Braille, you can certainly do that. However, to actually do those things, you need an LMS that allows you to customize it. And the thing about most LMSs is we can't. For example, Google Classroom. We can use Google Classroom, we can customize it to a certain extent. But if we really need something special, we can't do it in Google Classroom because we can only use what Google gives us. Okay? If you really want to customize an LMS to work for a specific situation, let's say for example, mga SPED kids natin, I think that's the point where you have to use things like Moodle, and then you can get perhaps a programmer to really customize that to your specific needs. Okay? Yun yung maganda sa Moodle because Moodle is what we call an open source software. As programmers, we can open the system and add and remove features that you want. Si Google kasi, it's owned by Google. Diba? Si Canvas or si Blackboard, it's owned by their own companies. We can just open it up and add and remove things. Okay, unfortunately, that's the best answer I can give right now. But yes, there are ways to adapt LMSs to SPED students.
So we have question from Mom LJ. Aside from Moodle and Google Classroom, ano pa pong LMS ang pwede niyang isuggest?
Okay. What I can suggest as far as Google and Moodle is concerned, Blackboard is very good. Okay. You can just Google that, the word itself, Blackboard Learn is good. The thing about Blackboard is it has a certain history. I think it's fixed now, but it has had issues in the recent past yung ginamit kasi siya yung pandemic na may mga nahahack tapos may mga nawawalang data. I think they've already fixed that. But in terms of interface design and the things that I've discussed in the 4 points, they all exist in usable forms in Blackboard. And also Canvas. Just again, Google the word Canvas. Not Canva, ha? May S dapat. Kasi yung Canva iba yun. Canvas. It's also an online LMS that I think is pretty good. But I'm not too familiar with Canvas. But it has all the basic features that you need as well. So that's a good question kasi again, I ran out of time here to actually show you different elements. I thought it would be better to focus on the criteria kasi you can examine the LMSs yourself. But that's what you need to do. That's why this is a good question. I encourage everybody here, go to the internet and find LMSs. Look at all of them and evaluate them and see their differences. That informs you as well of what you need to find in your own LMS or how to use your features better, things like that. Apply the criteria to all the LMS that you can find. So Google Classroom, Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, I think Edmodo is one. Ano pa ba? Even things like Coursera, no, those are not LMSs, but those are online courses that you can inspect as well. Okay, maybe edX. I think you can actually post classes on edX if you want. Okay, so inspect those as well. Nadami. Yeah.
So we have question from Mom Reggie. I'm interested to know what is the preferred number, minimum and maximum, of students in one class and online learning.
Oh, puro mga ano nyo, mga pang teacher talaga. I'm not an expert in this. Again, computer science ang background ko, not really, ano ba to? Educational leadership. But if you ask me in an online class, depende kasi sa'yo as the teacher. Now, you could do a fully automated online class. And you can have like 1,000 people join that class. Just like what they do in Coursera or edX. It's a fully asynchronous online course, meaning all the material is there. You just task the student or self-paced online learning. Lalagay mo lang materials, ito yung schedule na dapat ibigay, bahala na kayo. You can have 1,000, no problem. But the way we would like to teach, especially here in Ateneo, is we want to be there for the students. And it's easy to think that since you're doing it online, pwedeng 100, di ba? Okay na. But the thing is, it takes just about the same effort as in a real class. So, kung sa totoong klase mo, you can handle 40 students in an online class, I would also say, in one online class, stick to 40. Ipareho mo lang because it takes the same amount of time to check their work. It takes the same amount of time to talk to them. It takes the same amount of time to prepare your materials. So, kung ilan yung kaya mo sa physical, ganun din siguro sa online. Because you still talk to them, you still say hi, you still ask them if they're having problems, that takes the same amount of time. Nasa ibang lugar ka lang. Instead sa classroom mo ginagawa yun, you do it at home or you do it in front of a computer. Okay? Pag dinamihan mo na kasi, you can't engage the students as well. Even though it's online class, the engagement is still a job for a person and not the computer. To stick to what you used to be able to handle is my suggestion. Ayan, nakamute ata si Mama Ivy. Si Sir
Ay, sorry.
Almoneda.
Again, the question question of Sir Ramon, when we plan to give exams, how can we be assured of students not cheating us in an online setting?
Okay. Ito, how do you ensure that your students are not cheating? Bottom line, you can't. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but you really can't. However, you can try. You can try to prevent cheating. Here is a clear advantage of Moodle and those paid services like Canvas and Blackboard. And even Schoology, if you're familiar with Schoology. May bayad. Well, meron silang free, pero if you want all the features, you have to pay. Okay? Yun yung wala sa Google Classroom. But I suspect because it's not as expensive. Okay? If you want these features, you're going to have to pay for Blackboard and Canvas and or set up your own Moodle server. Pero ito lang naman yung sa akin. Even if you use Moodle, even if you use Canvas, even if you use Blackboard or Schoology, if your students really want to cheat, they can. Because yung mga sinasabi nilang anti-cheating protection, it's very easy to circumvent. Pwedeng may timer yung quiz mo, pero pwedeng may katabi sila sa kwarto, may ibang laptop, ginugugol yung sagot habang tinatimeron sila. Di ba? Pwedeng mag-video. Sabi mo, okay, on mo yung video camera nyo habang nagko-quiz kayo para nakikita ko kayo. Pwede naman yung naghahanap ng sagot nasa likod ng camera, tinataas na lang sa papel yung sagot. Okay? So, can you be assured of no cheating? I would say no. Can you do something about it? Yes. Can you try to address it? Yes. There are things like yun. Some teachers are asking their students to turn on their webcams whenever they do exams. Okay? What else is this? Time limits are also important. An important way of making sure that they are not cheating. Kasi if they try to cheat, they'll run out of time. So usually may 30 minutes lang, dapat tapos mo na. Things of that nature. And also, if you want a more technological solution, there are things that can make sure that the screen of the students is broadcasted to you. Di ba yung mga kinukuha mo yung nasa screen nila so you can see what they're doing in their computer screen. Okay, mga surveillance software of that nature. Okay, but again, they are not foolproof and it's very easy to break. Well, again, all it takes is another person in the room. So, wala, kahit anong ilagay mong protection or anything, ang daling sirain. Okay, so that's a problem that I don't have a good answer to. And if you know of an answer, sir, or a suggestion, or any other viewer that has a suggestion, I'd be happy to hear it.
We have question from Sir Estelito. Sir, for clarification only of what you mentioned a while ago, what is the major disadvantage of limiting your usage of LMS to Moodle platform only?
Okay. Moodle is one of the earliest and most popular LMSs that exist. What is the advantage of using Moodle only? Now, I'm not very familiar with the latest version of Moodle. But from my experience of Moodle, kasi ako since estudyante pa ako, nagmo-Moodle na kami around 2008 yata. Okay. Up to very recently as a teacher, I was also using Moodle for a time. The main disadvantage of Moodle, as far as those 4 criteria that we discussed is concerned, is it's very good in pacing. Okay, it can pace very well, it can modularize very well. Magaling ang Moodle sa pacing. Accessibility, it's also good. You can customize the way it looks, diba? You can even change its language. You can remove buttons to make it simple. Magaling ang Moodle sa accessibility. It also works on mobile. May mobile app yun, may website. Okay. Ang hindi ko gusto sa Moodle is its lack of collaboration tools, number 1. And it doesn't really support student agency that much. That's what I don't like about Moodle. In Moodle, you can't comment. Okay, as far as I know, this may have changed in the latest versions of Moodle, but in what I know, you cannot comment. You cannot engage with your peers. You can message your teacher. They can message you back. If you're a student, you can essentially email your teacher. They can email you back. But as far as a community, in community building, there's no feature for that. So what does that tend to do to the students who use Moodle? They tend to feel that they're isolated. There's no community there. As far as student agency is concerned, there's also nothing much there. There's no way to remind may konti din mga reminder. There's a very simple calendar in Moodle, di ba? as far as those 4 criteria is concerned, if you look at Moodle, they all exist there, but 2 of them are weak. That is collaboration and poor support for student agency. So what does that mean? Siguro pag Moodle, use it for college, siguro mga higher ed. Kasi I think that would work better there, diba? Students don't need as much social input and don't need as much agency. They already have that. But for, let's say, younger, you might want to look elsewhere, especially the interface. The interface of Moodle is not for people with very minimal, let's say, minimal skills and experience in using computers and websites.
So from Mom Joji, her question is, from your own experience, which among the LMS more or less provides you with the most important elements? For example, the 4 aspects you discussed this afternoon.
Okay, ano ang favorite ko based on the 4 aspects? Well, I've already shown you my favorite. It's Google Classroom. Number 1, it's free. And that's that's the most important thing to us right now, because everyone is now worrying for their bank accounts, especially the schools. Okay? Walang school na nakaligtas sa COVID. It's free. Why I like it is, aside from the 4 criteria, 4 aspects, the other thing is most people who use the internet also have a Google account. So the registration step is removed from the issue. Just ask them to use their Google account if you don't have yung mga university account, diba? They can use their personal accounts. That's why I like that. The third thing I like, before I even get to the 4 aspects of evaluation, is I like the way Google Classroom integrates with the rest of Google's products. Like I said, I'm a big fan of an integrated solution. Okay, that's anti-distraction. They don't have to go somewhere else to get a tool. They don't have to close the window to open this. No, they don't have to open a new tab to type something, di ba? Global, wala na. Lahat na sa isang lugar lang. And that close integration with Google's other products is very important to me. If I ask them to submit an essay, Google Docs is integrated. If I ask them to do, for example, a presentation, Google Slide is integrated. And if I want to meet my class, Google Meet is integrated. I just have to press a button and we're in a meeting. If I post an assignment in Google Classroom and I set the deadline to tomorrow, 9 p.m., Google will actually put that in the calendars of all my students. And Google will remind those students that some assignment is due. If I post a PDF, if I post a new video lecture, I post a new assignment, they will get notifications on their phones. They will get notifications in their emails. That's what I like about Google Classroom. That's even beyond those 4 aspects that I mentioned. Google Classroom has okay pacing support. It's good enough. I like Moodle's pacing support better because I can control how the modules look better and which modules are highlighted better in Moodle. But Google Classroom is okay pace support. It has good accessibility. It has the best accessibility out of all of these products. It's very easy to use. It's very simple. But you only have a few buttons here and there, and you know exactly what they will do. As far as agency is concerned, again, not the best as far as student agency is concerned, but it does encourage them to share. It does encourage them to act on their own. It does help them to digest the material offline. Okay, may mga reminders, yun ang mga sinasabi, mga calendar. Okay. And for social interactions, maganda rin ng Google Classroom. So yung 4 na yun, nandun lahat sa Google Classroom. Again, it's not the best, but it checks the box on most of these things while being free, while being integrated to a whole set of tools that you don't need to go out of Google to actually use and learn. And reducing the whole transaction cost and cognitive load to your students. Isang tool na lang lahat na nandun. Let's get to work, diba? Hindi yung let's learn another tool. Okay? Ayun. Thank you po.
So from Sir Robert, what LMS to be used in skills-based subjects?
Okay. So I'm assuming here when you say skills-based subjects, these are subjects that you primarily assess by studying or by observing an expressed skill. Diba? So, hindi siya parang academic masyado, no? You have to actually observe the skill in the student to say that they have learned. Well, what that says to me is you're interested in an artifact of the educational process. The result is an artifact. So it's either, let's say, for example, you're learning how to fix a car, in skills. How do you, ang output mo nun, yung coaching tumatakbo. Diba? Or if you're a technical writer, the output, the artifact is an actual paper. Diba? So that's my perspective here when you say skills-based subjects. Well, what that says to me is that primarily you'll be working with multimedia. Okay? If, let's say, you are in teaching a class about drama or something, and you have to, make a script that expresses drama. Okay? Or maybe, sabi ko sa kotse, maybe TESDA, di ba? TESDA, o nag-NC training ka for automotive repair. So, baka ang final project mo is video nung car kasi paano mo inayos, di ba? So, multimedia yung naiisip ko. In that case, I still think Google Classroom is the best. Bakit? If you need to share documents, again, Google Docs. If you need, let's say, accounting ka, you need to submit a balance sheet, Google Sheets. Okay? But here's the thing. If you actually need video, YouTube is integrated into Google Classroom. It's actually very integrated. If you post a YouTube video there, you click the video link, hindi na nga siya lumilipat sa YouTube, doon na siya nagpe-play mismo sa Google Classroom. So that makes it, again, a single tool that can handle many things. So that's again, that's my interpretation of your question. Okay. As far as multimedia is concerned, Google Classroom. Also, rubrics, again, skill-based, di ba? You have to have rubrics to evaluate the skill. Those are also implemented in Google Classroom. You can define your own rubrics for whatever is submitted to you for grading. Okay? So thank you for that.
So our last question would be from Sir Ruel. Paano po kung English at Filipino teachers ang magtuturo? Paano nila pababasahin ang mga students nila para matuto ng tama gamit ang LMS?
Okay. So, paano po kung English at Filipino teachers ang magtuturo? Paano nila pababasahin ang mga students? That's a difficult question. How do you get students to read? I don't know. How do you get adults to read? Because as far as I know, we are not a reading country. Nor is any country in the world anymore, I suppose. I assume. How do you get them to read? Well, sagot ko din siguro dun sa isang nagtanong kanina. I forget your name, but di ba nagtanong siya, how do you get your students to participate? Well, what I would suggest is, again, who do they listen to? And try to leverage that. Okay? Bakit ba nauso si Harry Potter? Kasi may nagpauso. And when that happened, people started reading books. Diba? How do you, kumbaga, spark that same spirit in an LMS? That's a difficult question to answer, okay? Hindi ko din alam kung paano mo pipilitin or paano mo sila pababasahin. What I would suggest is, I don't know here, I don't know who you're targeting, but I'm assuming here this is for smaller children. What do smaller children actually pay attention to? They don't pay attention to the parents too much. They don't pay attention to text. What they pay attention to is usually the most attention-worthy sensory input, which is sight and sound. Diba? So what I would suggest is, if you want them to read, if you want to engage the eyes, engage the ears and the movement as well. Okay? Which means try using multimedia. Your goal is to read. But to get them to read, capture their attention and motivate them by getting their other senses hooked into your lesson as well. Again, I'm not an education expert. My background is in computer science, but that's what we have multimedia for, diba? That's why it's called multimedia. It's multimodal. Target different senses at the same time para makuha mo yung attention. And then maybe they'll be more open to your suggestions. Okay? Or maybe pabasahin mo ng mga interesado sila. Okay? Ewan ko kung uso ba si Harry Potter ngayon. Hindi ko na alam kung ano ang uso ngayon. But again, find out what they like and leverage that to get what you want, which is in the end to get them to read. Baka mahilig pala sa mga hindi magic, baka mga robot yung gusto pa. Basahin mo ng ganun, diba? Okay, and LMS can help you do that because you can share those stories using the LMS. But what you actually do to get them to read, that maybe it might not be an authority to speak on that.
So we have our last na talagang question from Mom Gina Rocco. Sir, do we have to take note of what proper gadget to use for teaching mobile or laptop table to have a better accessibility?
Okay. What's the best gadget to use for an online class? Sisimplihan ko na lang kayo. Laptop. Laptop or desktop? The straight answer is mobile devices are poor devices when it comes to online education. Bakit? Cell phones and tablets are consumption devices. Okay? That's just the bottom line. It's a consumption device. You use it to consume information. Okay? Kaya maganda siya pang consume ng pictures, pang consume ng articles, pang consume ng YouTube, pang consume ng video sa Facebook. It's all about consumption. Minsan you get to share photos, but that's about all it can do. You can't share anything more than photos if you have a tablet or a cell phone. Most you do is consume. When you're engaging in an online class, you do consumption. Diba? You watch videos, you read articles, you can do that on a phone. Pero 50-50 kasi sa online class. 50% of the time you consume, 50% of the time you're supposed to produce. That's why every lesson may assignment. Ang problema then, if you only have a tablet, if you only have a phone, you will have a very hard time producing. Okay? In my field, computer science, we usually ask our students to program. Can you program in a cell phone? Yes, you can. The thing is, if you want to write, let's say 5,000 lines of program, of lines of code in a program, are you going to do this for 5,000 lines? Diba? In English, if you want your students to make an essay, are they going to do this to make an essay? Okay? And that's why I say, if you have the choice, always go for a full desktop or a laptop. Because mobile devices, this is really not what they're made for. They are for consumption, not for production. And online education is a 50-50 split of both. Okay, so that's my answer to that. But for accessibility, I think we don't have a choice. We also have to target people who only have mobile devices. Again, flexible nga dapat tayo. Yun yung meron. We have to lean a little bit in that direction, which means we have to make that production aspect easier for people who only have phones. So instead of maybe essay, mag-record na lang sila nung yung sinulat nila sa papel, babasahin na lang nila sa video habang nire-record nila yung sarili nila. Yun na yung essay. Imbis na ipapasulat mo yung essay, o sabi mo, write an essay and then look at the camera and read your essay. And that's what they submit to you. That's a bit easier on a mobile device. Yun, you have to adapt to increase that accessibility. But kung ano yung magandang gadget, laptop, stop.
Okay, I think that's it, Sir John. I think our viewers have well understood our topic for this afternoon. As much as we want to entertain and answer all your questions and read all your comments, at this moment, we will limit it for now. With that, this ends our Q&A session for this topic. We would like to thank our speaker, Sir John. Ateneo ICTC presents this certificate of appreciation to Sir John Sixto Santos for his invaluable time as our resource speaker for this afternoon's webinar session on digital home-based deciding the right learning management system. Thank you very much, Sir John. We also like to thank our viewers for staying with us this session. Your certificates are ready. Kindly accomplish the online evaluation flashed on screen. The online evaluation will be closing at 5 p.m. this afternoon. You may take a photo of or take down notes to get the link for the evaluation. After submitting the evaluation form, an automated response with your e-certificate will be sent to your email. Again, the evaluation form will be closing at 5 p.m. this afternoon. So you may take a photo or screenshot for you to get the evaluation form link that flash on screen. So we would like to inform you or dear participants for our next fourth webinar series entitled Effective Online Assessment Using Google Forms. The details for this webinar will be posted on our FB page. So please don't forget to like our official Facebook page, Ateneo ICTC. So doon namin ilalagay po yung registration link for this webinar. Again, thank you everyone. Kindly like our Facebook page at Ateneo ICTC and subscribe to our YouTube channel to get updates on our free webinar sessions and upcoming training online. Thank you and see you again. Goodbye.